Celina, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
having
making the time. I know you have a lot going on at the moment. I wanted to ask you, because we have a few health professionals who've come on that podcast, and I'm always fascinated by what drives people, what made them go into a particular profession. So why did you choose to be a nutritionist?
There was two things. I was really interested into anything health. I was looking for a profession in the health field, but I've also always liked food and cooking. So at some point, when I was reading about different course syllabus, I thought that these met two things that I really like mixed together. So I thought
Why
could
not?
be very interesting.
In your studies, and as well as in your practice, because you've been practicing for a while now, what is the thing that shocked you the most when you were doing your studies that you found out about nutrition that you didn't know before?
I think it was probably the incidence of diabetes in Mauritius, because even though I studied in Australia, they were talking about the incidence of Mauritius as being one of the fourth rates in the world.
Oh, wow. In the world?
In the world.
Wow.
So that was something I remember being quite shocking. Otherwise, I think in any human anatomic or physiology classes is to see how it's all so complex and so interlinked. Before studies, I would not realize to which extent it would have been so entwined.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about nutrition facts that you find in your daily practice? What do people tend to think that is actually not necessarily true?
As a myth or more as a concept?
Concept, yeah.
Concept, I think people think that if they get interested into nutrition, they have to be very strict and have a kind of all or nothing approach towards it, that even they just cut off so many things or they keep doing what they do. Whereas if you knew more about nutrition, maybe most days you could do a little better, even though if it's not perfect. And that if you were doing maybe just those little things, it could be more as a prevention rather than getting interested into nutrition when you need a cure for something. Yes. I think it's always at the back of people's mind, but to put into practice, I think most people are scared of nutrition. It's a word that scares a lot of Mauritians, especially.
Yes. And also I think that's when you tend to see some people going into crash diets. And in the end, I always think that it's, in a way, it's perhaps worse, because when they stop crash dieting, a lot of people actually put on more weight than what they had to start with.
Because they start again with the habits that made them put on weight in the first place. So there's no reason that when you get into those same habits, they don't end up in the same results. And in the meantime, you've had a shock to your body, so he reacts a bit more pronouncedly to the same diet. But the option is, if you don't make an effort, you keep putting the weight, actually. It's not about losing or staying the same. It's either continue to put on or
and then
trying to stop it.
It becomes even more difficult to lose it, because you get into this vicious cycle. And say that, for example, if you're like 30 or 40 kilos overweight, the thought of having to go down there can be quite off-putting.
Of course, because you know it's going to be a lot of effort, and it usually is. It doesn't happen by miracle, unfortunately.
Yes. And I think a lot of people tend to think as well, and I always, I have some friends who I always tease, because they think because they exercise every day, then they're surprised that they're actually either not losing any weight or actually putting on weight. And I think that's another misconception, that people tend to think that, the focus should be exercise. Whilst exercise is important, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think nutrition is actually more important if you're trying to lose weight.
If you're trying to lose weight, yes. Some people eat healthily enough so that when they do only the sport, it's good enough.
Of course.
But some people have quite bad food or eating habits. So even though they are doing the exercise, it's not enough to create a calorie deficit that will lead them to weight loss. And I think this little piece is often missing in the puzzle.
And talking about bad food habits, and I don't know whether it's related to, you mentioned the stats about Mauritians being the 4th highest rate in the world for diabetes. We do love our sugar here. We do love we have, I think we tend to have a sweet tooth. I have a sweet tooth myself. So my question is, and I've always been fascinated by that, and I'm not sure I have the complete answer, but are all sugars the same? What do we understand when we talk about sugar? Because I think the popular explanation that we would have is that we think about the sugar cane and the sugar that we put in our tea, but that's just one aspect of it.
Yes, sure. In fact, all carbs, so carbohydrate in the full name, are degraded into sugar, into glucose, because this is the fuel for the body. So I'd say that the more it takes time for the carbs to get into sugar, the better that carb is, or the less impact it has. Let's say if we have quinoa, which has also protein and fiber, but carbs also, it will be, this sugar is less available and will take more time to be available and turn into glucose. But if I have cane sugar or honey or others, so it will really depend what are the other components of the food to classify how complex or simple the carb is. And we want the most complex carbs because the body needs carbs. It doesn't need a lot. That will be depending on individual needs, but most people don't need that much carb, but we do need a bit because that's what fuels the body. And if I have more quinoa, brown rice, or more vegetables, these all contain enough fiber so that the carbs that they will contain will be released more slowly into the bloodstream.
So instead of having a huge spike, it will increase, but it would steadily increase and then plateau.
Exactly. And the benefit of that is that it doesn't trigger a release of too much insulin. Insulin is a hormone that takes sugar out of the bloodstream and goes to stock it either in the muscle, for an athlete that's very important, but also to the liver or to the fat stores.
Right.
So the more insulin I trigger, the more I store. Even though it is sugar, I will store it as fat.
I see.
And the more I store, the less sugar there is left in my body. So maybe I'll feel I have difficulty to concentrate, or I feel sleepy after lunch. I think the best example is after biryani.
Yes, yeah, you just feel really drowsy.
Everyone is just
So that's because there's potatoes, there's rice,
and not so much meat, no vegetables, or not enough fiber. So there's a huge amount of quite simple carbs being released into the bloodstream, probably with a sugary drink.
With a nice Pepsi or Coke or whatever.
Exactly. So even more sweet, and then so there will be too much sugar, causing too much insulin to be released. So the sugar drops abruptly. It's been stored. There's nothing left in the.
I see. So then it causes the crash, or
I call it the kaya kaya. A bit like dry, difficult to focus. Sometimes even irritability. And really the sugar cravings as well, because you feel like if only I could have a little sweet that would pick me up and I could focus again.
But it's counterintuitive because it's just further extending the effects. With that little treat that you're going to have in your mid-afternoon crash, you're spiking the level once again.
Yes, because you will less likely want an apple and more pastry or something quite sweet because you feel so low.
Lethargic and So does that mean, based on what you said, does that mean we should avoid or at least decrease simple carbs in our diet?
I don't think it's necessary to go like this all or nothing
approach.
no, we don't eat white rice at all, and I don't think it's realistic for most people, but at least to try to decrease if the amount was significant. But if I can't decrease, then it's best if I go to brown, even though brown will also
have the sugar.
It doesn't have less sugar, but it has more fiber, so that it's more slowly.
So it's actually the fiber, it's not the sugar content as such, it's actually the fiber that kind of slows down the release of the... Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
And that's what we want to have. But I can also have white rice with a lot of green vegetables or even other vegetables that have the fiber, even though my rice doesn't have the fiber.
Sure. So for example, if I'm having like a whole plate of broccoli, let's say for argument's sake, so it's still a carb, it has the sugar, but because there's so much fiber in it, actually I'm not, because presumably it's not like, I use broccoli as an example because it's not a protein and I don't think it's a fat either, so it must be some kind of complex carb, but because it's got so much fiber in it, and I guess the sugar content is lower as well.
It's very low. The carb content of broccoli and most vegetables is very low. There is a little bit, but nothing compared to quinoa or brown rice or oats, which are quite starchy. The broccoli would not be starchy, so it has very little sugar. It has a lot of water. Plus the fiber, vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, okay. And do you find that, again, I keep coming back to diabetes because it's such a big issue in Mauritius, and I think that at least the first step towards managing it, because we can't necessarily, in most cases, cure it as such, is the first step nutrition. Do you think that someone who's diabetic or pre-diabetic can, to a large extent, manage or put his diabetes into remission with the proper nutrition?
It happens, and it happens the most when it's taken the earliest. So if you had pre-diabetes, it's the time to take care of your diet and have some clues to know what spikes your level, what is the right amount for you, because maybe your friend eats this amount and
they're fine.
It's fine with them, but you don't have the same metabolism, you don't have the same hormonal background, maybe the friend is more or less active, so there will be different things which are very individual. So I think but if you take care of it while you're pre-diabetes and you stick to those healthy habits, it happens a lot that you don't get.
Yeah, you don't need to go on the meds, or at least at the high doses. Or
yes,
whatever.
Or maybe if ever your doctor gave you meds from the first time, because you have good result and good management, he can take you off the meds quite quickly as well, or progressively or whatever, but then you're not stuck with them forever, which is often what people don't want.
Yeah.
But sometimes also they are already, the diagnosis is not pre-diabetes, but diabetes. But because it's taken so early, it didn't do so much damage yet. So it's more easy. Maybe this patient will have to be a bit more strict. It will all depend how willing they are, but the nutrition will be doing a lot. And of course, if they add physical activity to it, it helps even better. But it does happen for a motivated patient. It can happen, or at least to decrease the medication if you can't reverse the diabetes, at least to reduce it is already quite a relief for most patients.
And with those patients, I realize that sounds quite extreme, but would you ever recommend, at least in the first stage, actually cut out all sugar from your diet, or do you think that's too unrealistic and actually they would just give up because it's so hard to do?
I think the best is to see what the patient is capable of doing. Usually it would not be my first reflex to cut it out all, But if the small amounts that I put are not sufficient to reduce completely, and the patient doesn't want to take medication and rather cut off carbs and sugar, then it will be whatever they decide and they feel the most comfortable with doing. But usually I will try to keep a bit of carbs so that at least there's no craving, or when there's a family gathering, even if there's not a lot on the plate, they can still taste.
Yeah. And without feeling left out or judged. Because we often feel that sometimes, I think people fear the regard des autres, that they will be judged for, oh, you're always on a diet, or oh, this and that, and they feel that they have to integrate in society. So it can be quite hard to, if you're off everything, to not have any.
Yes, it's sometimes also hard even if you have a little.
Yes, I find it hard.
There's many aunties who want you
exactly.
to have a big
Oh,
plate.
come on, have this bit. You can fast tomorrow. But in terms of when you look at the plate, and in terms of what is normal, although there's probably not one answer for this because everyone's different. You know how in Mauritius we love our big heap bowl of rice. Let's use rice as an example because that's kind of the staple food in Mauritius. How big the portion should the rice be?
So that will be very different for maybe for me or you.
Let's say like a person who's healthy-ish.
But it will depend of their height as well, of their physical activity.
Okay.
It really depends.
Okay.
Or what it should be is a side.
I see.
Not a main. And that's what usually now what it is a main, and then little things.
Exactly. A little bit of veg here, a little bit of meat here.
No,
yeah.
it should be a side. I would say no more than the amount of meat that you're taking. So that's very different from each person, and maybe some people are not eating enough meat or protein food, but let's say it's about that. So that the protein can act as something that will slow your digestion and thus the release of sugar from this rice.
I see.
And then to put a lot of vegetables as much as you can every day to ensure you have also the fiber helping the protein slow down.
Yeah. And I think probably a lot of people probably don't, unless you're vegetarian, a lot of people probably don't have as much vegetable as they should. Or what I encounter sometimes is, and I try to kind of stay away from them, is someone will say, I've had a really healthy breakfast because I had a freshly made fruit juice, which has about 6 or 7 fruits in it. And I just always think, like, can you imagine the amount of sugar in that? And you're kind of getting rid of all the fiber to a large extent, and you're keeping all the sugar. But because it's fruit, people tend to think, I've had a really healthy breakfast. What are your thoughts on fruit juices?
I think fruit juice, the advantage it has is that it keeps the vitamins and minerals. But between fiber and vitamins and minerals, I would suggest you keep the fiber rather than the vitamins, even though it's nice to have vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying they're wrong, but if I had more fiber, I would feel fuller. It will help me. I would feel fuller now, but also later, like until my next meal also. And then it will be something that will help all my digestive system as well. Whereas the sugar of 6 fruits, would I really be eating 6 fruits?
Of course not. Yeah.
And chewing it and keep going.
Because it's tiring in itself, and that in itself is burning calories because you're asking more of yourself, the act of chewing, but also your digestive system is having to work harder when it's having to digest the fiber.
Yes, but most importantly, your brain is assimilating that you've been eating. When you drink, it's like, what happened?
Yeah. It's gone in 30 seconds.
It's gone in 30 seconds. Was it really juice or water? It's very confusing for the brain.
I see.
Whereas when you're chewing, it really sends a lot of messages to your brain that we are eating, we are chewing. we should be full soon. There's a lot of signals like that, physical, hormonal signals that help the brain really say, okay, wow, I've eaten so much, I will be okay. And it's a bit of the same process when I add a lot of vegetables to my lunch, let's say. It asks me to be like chewing. So I'm taking more time as well. But if I had just, let's say, rice and chicken, if I have a lot of bread sauté on it, it takes more time to chew. And all this time gives my brain time to feel full. Otherwise, I want a second helping, much more so. Sometimes it's not even good and I want the second helping because I still feel hunger.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just the mind or the gourmandise that makes us want more. But sometimes it's just that process that the brain needs.
I hadn't realized hadn't made the connection, but you're quite right. So in terms of, so we've dealt a bit with sort of the sugars and the carbs. But another thing that I also find fascinating, and I only kind of started reading about it because I'm doing more sports than I used to now, is I don't think people have enough protein in their diet. And the reason I think that is that, as I'm getting older, I'm reading that as you age, especially after the age of 40, you lose muscle mass and also bone density as you age. And that led me to thinking that, are we having enough protein in our diet? I'm not talking particularly about vegetarians, but just people in general. Based on the people you see, do you think that people do have enough protein? Because, say for example, for breakfast, for people who do have breakfast, the typical breakfast is they'll either have cereal or they'll have bread. I can't unless people are having eggs regularly, there's not much protein going on typically in the breakfast, which leaves 2 meals for having your entire protein allowance for the day. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we don't really need a lot of protein, but we need a bit and every day. Let's say, depending on, like if you're not doing so much sport, it's about 800 grams per kilogram of your own body weight. So if you're, it's too hard to measure, but it's about 50 grams.
Right, okay.
If you're about 60 kilos.
Kgs. Yeah, okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If my mental calcs are good. So if I have a piece, like a deck of cards of chicken, meat, fish, it won't be the same ratio, but let's say it's between 20 and 30 grams of pure protein, and this weighs about 100 grams. Okay. If I have 2 of these, I'm already having 40.
I see. So that's already, I'm almost there. Yeah.
I'm almost there. And if I have some dairy or nuts, they also contain protein. So if I have maybe milk in my cereals and I add a bit of seeds and nuts, I could easily get enough. Okay. This is for 60 kilograms. So if I'm 80 and I eat only this much, I need more.
It's not enough. Yeah.
It will really depend on individuals. I found that with protein, sometimes either people don't have enough,
or they have too much.
And I see a lot of people having too much because of many diets that went on, like Atkins, etc.
Yeah.
And they feel like protein is calorie-free somehow, and that they can go all in on that and maybe be careful with rice, or maybe they don't. They're not even careful with rice either, but I think it's important to eat meat, especially men sometimes feel this way, and they sometimes
have too much. Plus they'll have
overdo it,
powders and everything. Yeah, on top of that, probably. Yeah.
Probably, and if they go to gym, it's true that there's a lot of pressure on protein, and sometimes they end up eating or taking too much protein, which the excess of protein is just going to be stored as fat.
Exactly, yeah.
Any other excess.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're unaware of that and they wonder why the efforts from a diet don't work with the efforts at the gym. Well, if you're eating too much protein, that could be a problem. I think that there's also another extreme of people who don't eat much protein because they either don't like it too much, or maybe it's less accessible for them, or it's not cooked or not cooked the way they like because it's someone else that cooks at home. And so there are also people, of course, not having enough. These people will feel quite tired because they could be anemic or iron deficient. They would have maybe brittle nails, hair falling, and this is something we see quite a lot. We all know someone losing their hair for no reason, and sometimes it's a lack of protein
in their diet. And what about fats? I feel that fats for a long time got a bad name because people automatically associated fats with cholesterol. They associated fats with, fatty meat and ham and that kind of thing, and also the cholesterol in eggs or whatever. So, but I think not now, only now, but I think more and more now people are starting to make the distinction between healthy fats, which are important for our health, and perhaps more unhealthy fats. What do you normally recommend to someone in terms of their fat intake? Do you feel that people generally have enough fats in their diet because they're eating cheese and consuming milk, for example? Or do you recommend you should incorporate a bit more, for those who can afford it, a bit more avocado, have a bit more nuts, olive oil? What do you recommend normally?
I think that the amount of fat there is in the diet, I rarely see it as being not adequate enough, because there's always des fritures,
of course.
We live most motion cuisines
have some sort of fried stuff.
One will be crème fraîche, the other one will be, I don't know, there's a lot of fat in most of the cuisine here, so I don't feel like this is lacking, but the quality of the fat is not always the best, and people are not so aware of that. Sometimes when they try to cut off by themselves, they will cut off all fats, whereas the fat we should be avoiding or trying to slow down are the saturated fats. They are the ones which are solid at ambient temperature. So if I take let's say I take cheese, it's solid. Butter, if I have fresh cream, I only need to whip it so that it turns solid. So that counts as well as solid. If I take a piece of meat or chicken, the fat is solid. And then anything that I do from butter or cream goes to the same rule. If I take any pastry, it's made of butter, butter is solid. If I take coconut oil or palm oil at ambient temperature, maybe not in the middle of summer, but otherwise, they are also solid because they have the same saturated fat in them.
Oh wow! So why do people say that coconut oil is good for you, or is it actually not that great?
I don't believe it's that great, and I think it can be less solid than butter, let's say. So they do a lot of research into finding molecules or particles or research on medium chain triglycerides, which is contained in the coconut. But it's still under research, and even if there's something good, if the rest is not great,
it overweighs the goodness.
It overweighs. So I see a lot of things on internet also about coconut oil, but I would not be recommending it for people, especially for a daily use. If you use it once in a recipe for the flavor, or sometime I would use coconut milk in a Thai curry. It's delicious and it's nice to have it sometimes, but it's not something I would be doing every day, because I think it's not the right quality of fat.
If I'm cooking with something, would something like avocado oil be better?
Avocado oil is very fragile, so might not be good for cooking.
I see.
But
So when
otherwise,
you're
yes.
heating it up, you mean? So when you're heating
Yes,
it up,
it burns very quickly. The smoke point is very low.
I see.
Just like all the nuts oil, but that's the opposite of in the unsaturated fats, the good fats, you will find nuts because exactly when you extract the oil is absolutely liquid. You will also find salmon, even put in a fridge. You always have this flak deal.
Yes, but that's good fat.
That's good fat.
Yeah.
So you have the same good fat in fish oils. They all, even though it's fish, it's animal, it's liquid. So this is of good quality. And same avocado oil.
Yeah.
You can put it on the shelf. It will not. It will
solidify.
Solidify.
Yeah.
So this is a bit how you know
Sure.
which fat is good or not. And the aim is to try to put more of the good fats, because why they're good or bad is because the one we call good fats are actually anti-inflammatory, whereas the other ones are pro-inflammatory. So and inflammation can be everywhere. It can be intestine inflammation or stomach inflammation or inflammation in your joints, in your arteries, many diseases or des petits maux du cœur comes from inflammation. So if you had less or more anti-inflammatory diet, that would be something good. And a lot of that comes from fat.
So something like if I'm making like a nice salad and I, sprinkle it with lots of olive oil, that's good.
Yes.
Because the olive oil is well, it's liquid, it doesn't solidify. But again, probably not great to cook with because
it's so fragile.
It's fragile. Okay.
And so olive oil is an oil that has a quite good ratio of being, you can cook it, not fry with it, but cook it to some temperature, where at the same time you can use it on salads, and it's quite affordable as well, compared to other oils, which are sometimes also more flavorful, so you don't want to have it all the time. Let's say a walnut oil. You have to really like walnuts.
And you don't want it to kind of overpower the meal, or you're just getting that as a scent.
Exactly. So it's very good, but it's just to which extent do you use it so that it doesn't become rancid as well. So if you use it all the time, it's great to get it.
Yes.
But even though it's better than olive oil, I rarely recommend people to buy it because I rather they have something of every day which is affordable,
which
that
they can
be
store
cooked,
for a long time.
They can make salads or whatever, and there's a turnover rather than something that stays on the shelf
for months, and
so
then they
long,
have to chuck it.
And then they feel like, this new
waste of money.
waste of money. Let's go back to old habits.
Yes, and then the bad oil. Last question for you, Celina, because I think nutrition is such a fascinating subject, and I completely understand why you decided to kind of focus on that as a career. Because everyone is so different, do you think everyone could benefit from a nutritionist? Because I think, for someone who's seemingly healthy, as you said, a lot of the things that goes on inside our body, we don't necessarily see until it's too late sometimes, say for inflammation, for example, until it's too late. So do you think anyone could benefit from seeing someone to just guide them as to, whether they have the right proportions or do you think it has to be someone with a specific goal? Like I want to lose weight, for example.
It's easier to help someone who has a specific goal because you know what they expect. But I think that if you wait to have a good reason to see someone, then probably you never see someone. And I have patients with various conditions that have been waiting a long time, trying to find solutions on their own, reading things on internet, sometimes having contradicting opinions from their friends or even from the doctors. You might do that or this, and they don't know. There's too much information and they don't know either what is true or to which extent, or how to apply it to themselves. Because if I tell you to reduce your carbs, maybe you don't know to which extent, maybe you feel tired when you do. So you need a solution that maybe you don't have to come all the time, but maybe you came twice, you know what to do, and you've addressed the issues, little things that maybe when I eat that I don't digest it well, so I fear of eating that. Okay, we'll find something else then. More people, I don't say that everyone absolutely needs to see a nutritionist, but at least to be aware of what is healthy eating and how could I do better, and then I decide if I want to do better every day or someday, to which extent, because of my lifestyle, of my work commitments, my family commitments. But at least I know what I should aim. I think that will be something great if people could at least have this information and have it for really their own needs and feel concerned. And then they try to do what they can do.
Yeah, within the limits of their budget and
Of course, and the other commitments as well. But at least it's there at the back of their mind rather than not knowing. And probably so many people think they're doing the right thing and put a lot of effort, of energy and money and trying to do something that's the best, but it doesn't fit them because...
And then they give up.
And then they give up. It's quite distressing as well. And maybe it worsens symptoms of something they had because it was not the right thing to do for them.
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes it's a shame people take so long before seeing someone or not see someone at all, whereas you could also try to see how you can manage to make it work for you without necessarily committing to seeing the nutritionist
for months on end.
For months and on. It doesn't have to be... Again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah. And I see it also as a package, because it's, if you're looking after your health, you wouldn't hesitate, if you were not feeling great, you wouldn't hesitate to go to the doctor. So if you felt you weren't at your optimal level nutrition-wise, I think the same reasoning should apply to go to see a nutritionist, because it's also in the health sector. And if you wouldn't hesitate to go to a doctor, then you shouldn't hesitate to go. I mean, that's the way I think.
I think so too, but I think sometimes there's not a pressure, but people will tell you, or sometimes the doctors are not exactly aware of how much nutrition can impact, but they don't have the time to go through the nutrition of the patient. That's not their job either. But they're not sometimes convinced themselves, so they would say, just take that or just do that, don't worry about the rest. And if my doctor told me that, I'll be like, why would I worry about the rest? So I think that's a barrier. Otherwise, sometimes it's the entourage. I would say, but don't worry, I did this and this, it worked.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it.
You don't need to go spend your money there or waste time there, etc. So I think sometimes people could be a little motivated, and then there's other factors that make them change their mind or not take the step forward, which is a shame, because when there's so many people that I feel relieved sometimes even to talk about it, to have someone to talk about how frustrating it is not to be eating this and that, or how scared they are for their own health. I think it's...
Without that feeling of, because particularly I think for people who are perhaps overweight or obese and trying to lose weight, to not feel that sense of shame, to feel that I can freely talk with someone when there is absolutely no judgment from them, and who can advise me objectively and not have this, as you said, everyone's opinion.
I think that's nice as well. And then it's about them. It's not about the diet someone else tried. You feel taken cared for. And at least that's what I try to do with people that come to see me, is that they feel like I often tell them, your responsibility is to follow what I say. if what I say is good, then it's my problem.
That's a nice thing
if
to
that
say,
doesn't bring you the result you want, that's my
see.
stress to have.
Yeah.
Your task is to follow what I say.
I've given you a framework, try it, and
But it takes a bit of that worry out, or at least I hope it does, because otherwise there's so many, especially if you read a lot on the internet or you had the advice of all the family, the colleagues, and everyone you meet, it's overwhelming.
Of course. Who to trust, who to listen to,
and how to put it into practice, because that's the hardest thing.
I think that is the hardest, because we always feel that, that's why sometimes say, I have a cheat day, which I think is okay. I think if you're eating healthily 95% of the time, you allow yourself to a little treat from time to time, because it's realistic then.
Yes, and it's also part of having a healthy relationship with food.
Exactly.
It's not only restriction or something that's supposed to be stress. It's also something that's supposed to be enjoyed.
Exactly.
But I think it's finding a balance, which would be not necessarily the same for everyone, because everyone doesn't have the same health. But I think it's also important to have a bit of gourmandise, a bit of enjoyment. With
pour
food.
savourer un petit peu as well. To not feel that, as you said, it's all or nothing. I think that summarizes your approach as well.
Yeah. Very much so.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Celina. I know you're probably going on leave soon, but otherwise, how can people reach you? Where do you consult, and because you also mentioned you do online consultations.
Yes, and I think I'll be doing a bit more of online now. So I have they can either type Celina Maurel Nutritionist on Facebook, or they find my number. I think it's on Google, it's everywhere. So they can either directly call me, but at the moment the receptionists are more available to take appointments and all. So I'm in Synergie on Wednesdays, and I'm also in Clinique d'Arnay on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So they can call directly there to book the appointment, and it's usually quicker that way than through me.
Of course.
But for online bookings, then I handle.
They can find you on the internet.
Yes, it's everywhere.
Thank you, Celina. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joanne.